Hey everyone, Theron Asbury again with Revital Outdoors. Today's podcast, we have a very exciting member of our pro staff program. He's located in Central Florida. He fishes all the BFL Gator Division tournaments. He's had great success fishing tournaments in Florida. He's just all around. He's fished a lot of tournaments in Florida and done really, really well with it. So we're very excited to have him on board. And then today also, we're actually going to be having our CEO and president of the company, Kyle Smith. He's going to be joining us as well. These guys go back a little bit of ways and have fished a lot of tournaments together and had a lot of great success. So we're excited to have them. But before we get started, make sure if you're liking all this content, you want to subscribe to our channel to see all of our future podcasts and get notified when they're happening. Make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube page. Click that notification button so that you get all of the latest updates from Vital Outdoors. That being said, without further ado, we have John Mobley and Kyle Smith. Let's go ahead and bring him in. Good morning, guys. How are you?
What's up?
Awesome, man. Good morning.
Another day in paradise. So, John, very excited to have you on board. Met you last year at the Super Tournament on Lake Okeechobee. I think you had a very solid event there, and then you went on to the regional last year on the St. Johns River. I know you and Kyle have been friends for a while, so let's talk about first and foremost, how'd you all get into fishing? I mean, I guess you guys met each other before you could remember. Who was the better hammer, and what's the history between the two of you?
Well, before Kyle jumps in, I am the better hammer. All right.
Okay.
Let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. No, Kyle and I met. We were in the 6th grade, and he had moved from Jacksonville to MacClenney. His family did, and so we met there, and we pretty much immediately, hit it off, and we've been, best friends ever since. And he and I both share a love for the outdoors, and especially for me, man. I eat, sleep, and breathe bass fishing, and I was ate up with it, and so that really was something that I guess has always held our friendship together, and that we've shared so many days on the water and whatnot, and that's kind of how it started.
It started with an aluminum John boat that we'd load up in the bed of the truck, and we'd go to all the local lakes, and then obviously we'd always talk smack about who could throw a trick worm around the best, because that's all we knew how to do whenever we were sophomores and juniors in high school. So that little bit of competitive flame, just being on opposite ends of the same John boat, I think is kind of where it's fueled the fire.
Yeah.
And then I like, from my earliest memories, man, I remember fishing a Thursday nighter. There was one of our favorite lakes around Northeast Florida is called Lake Sampson. It's an awesome lake. It can be hit or miss, but when it's on, it's fun to fish, man. And when it's not so fun to fish. But they always run fun Thursday nighters, just little 3-hour tournaments. And John and I were like, let's fish one, right? And I had a little 14-foot bass boat with a 40 on the back. And I remember, like, we didn't catch many fish. We won the tournament. We won first and big fish on that tournament. And I think we only had 3 fish.
Yeah, like 3 or 4 fish. And it was this lake is, especially once in any lake, I'm sure around the country, once you start getting into the end of the summer, and that lake has been beat to death on Saturdays and Sundays, and then again on Thursday nights or Wednesday nights, whatever night your little local weekly tournament is, it's tough, dude. And I think we had like 2 or 3, let's say little ones, a couple pounds. And I won't ever forget, like, we were going down this Kissimmee grass maiden cane line, and we're both, throwing towards the grass edge, and there's a little bit of like pepper grass that was growing off behind us. And back then we were throwing, Kyle, remember that buzztail shad we used to throw a lot?
I probably never threw it again after that, but
dude,
yes.
I've still got some. I was actually organizing my shop the other day and found some. But anyways, it's not an easy bait to throw. I mean, the joker's not but like that long, and it's super light. You throw it. Anyways, you just buzz it across the top. So I threw out there at this little patch of grass that was out kind of off the bank. And I bet I didn't get 5 or 6 cranks in, and like the sun's going down, we're about to have to go weigh in, and just the water just erupted, just boom. And I think it was like a 5-pounder or so. And we were both just jacked, man. And we're like, all right, let's go weigh it in and see where we land. And dude, we won, man. And that was the first tournament I'd ever fished, the first tournament that Kyle ever fished. And ever since then, man, I've been hooked. And that's really what started it all.
It was awesome. And then since then, I mean, you and I have always had pretty good luck fishing tournaments together, man. We went on a hot streak in Rodman when the Alabama rigs first came out.
Yep.
That was a lot of fun. We were catching 20+ pound bags every single time, dude, just chunking and winding A rigs around the stump field channels. And it was a blast, dude.
It was awesome.
Doubles, triples.
Yes. It was. And the key, Kyle, I don't know if you remember, the key was like we were both standing side by side on the front deck, which is, very tricky with Alabama rigs, right? But the key was, I mean, you had to like, one of us would throw past the stump and, you'd get 10 or 12 cranks in and then the other one would throw. And one of us, I guess, usually the second one that was coming past that little area you get, man, it was awesome.
That was such a good bite.
Yep.
And then there was that 3Bs tournament.
Yeah,
that was cool.
That one was really cool because that one, I think we won like $1,600. And that was, I mean,
that's a big deal back in early college days, dude.
Oh, absolutely.
We were both in college, and Kyle had class. I think you were at UF, I think, or maybe Santa Fe.
I was at University of Florida.
And I had that. It might have been a Sunday tournament, so I went out there on Saturday and we kind of pre-fished around, or maybe it was a Friday, anyways. And Kyle couldn't go with me. Well, dude, that morning I found I think I caught like a 6 or 7 pounder flipping and shook off another one, like, really close to it. So I called Kyle up. I was like, dude, I know where we're going to fish. And it was a 3-fish tournament. And it was on Orange Lake, which is just outside of Gainesville. And so the next morning we ran and, I think we caught a small limit first thing in the morning. And then we ran over this little spot. I think I caught a 4-pounder. And then we left for a little bit and came back, Kyle, like right at the end of the day. And
the bait fish was just going nuts. The sun had warmed the mat. It was cold, man. The sun had warmed the mat, and the bait fish was active in that hydrilla mat. And John flips in there and hooks into like a. Did you catch the big one first?
I think I caught the 6-pounder first.
Something.
It was like 6 something, and then there, and I didn't pitch probably, I don't know, maybe that far away from where I just caught that fish, and then I hooked an 8-pounder. And dude, it was just like holy. And all 3 of those fish all came, I mean, within like a kitchen table, size away from one another. Like they were all, for whatever reason, they were mixed. It was like hydrilla mixed in with lily pads, and it was like kind of back. It was super sneaky little spot, man. It was back behind the pads a good ways. Man, it was. Then we ran in. We were with Kyle. We lost the net. The net blew. The net blew out of the boat, and
we were a hot
mess,
man.
Dude, we were just like stoked, man. But and that's what that little bit of money is what that we won. That helped me buy my first Humminbird side engine unit, and then
oh wow,
and then the rest is kind of history with that, because that's kind of how what I've really studied and stuff as far as finding stuff on the river, and I really like fishing offshore stuff too. So.
The St. John's River, John's put in an extremely large amount of time into the St. John's River.
Yep.
So, okay, well, that's how you guys kind of got started. John, what kind of prompted you to start fishing, bigger and better tournaments? Like with Major League Fishing, obviously back then it would have been FLW. Like, what's kind of been your roadmap since like those times that you and Kyle were fishing tournaments together?
So I've kind of taken the traditional approach. I started off kind of fishing some local stuff, and I fished a club for a year where I did really well, and kind of from there, we would have a winter series that I helped run, and so I got a lot of local experience on a lot of the lakes and stuff that are close by, that are around the house here in Northeast Florida. But every time I would go to the St. John's River, dude, I'd get smoked, and it took me forever to figure it out. And eventually I just was like, you know what, I commit myself to the river, and I really put in a lot of time and started doing, fairly well on the river, and won a handful of, pretty good sized tournaments there. But I kind of wanted to again take it up to the next level. And so finally in 2020, which I think it was FLW at the time. They hadn't had the merger yet, I don't believe. But they finally changed the BFL Gator Division schedule to where they weren't all on Okeechobee.
Mm-hmm.
Okeechobee's what, 5 and some change hours from the house, and they did it in 2020. The first one was on the St. Johns River, and I'm like, dude, I'm sold. I'm gonna try to fish it that year, and wound up really having a solid year that year. I won one and come second in the points. It was just, and so that's kind of been my roadmap, I guess, if you will. And I fished one year. I fished they were the Costas. I think it was 2018. I fished the Costas for a year, and after I made a little bit of money fishing, I won a big tournament around the house on the St. Johns, and so I have fished that one year. But for now, it's just the BFLs, and dude, I love it, man. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got a lot of great tournaments, a lot of divisions. For those listeners out there who haven't heard, Revital Outdoors is a title sponsor to Major League Fishing and the BFL League. So that's comprised of several different divisions throughout the country. I got started tournament fishing myself with the Okie division back in 2009. And I know that if you look at the BFLs, you have the BFL divisions, and then each division qualifies for a regional. At each regional, BFL regional, there's 4 different divisions, sometimes 5 different divisions that are competing against one another. And then the top 6 from that regional go to the All-American. And if you think about professional fishing as a whole, there's been numerous amount of guys that have gotten their start into professional fishing in their career through the BFL All-American. So they started basically fishing tournaments like you and I and everyone else is just the BFLs. And I mean, those are the Jacob Wheelers of the world, Clark Wentlet, Troy Morrow, Jeremy Starks. Like, there's several guys that have made it all the way through to having the career that they do today just because of the BFL tournament. So that's really cool. You just mentioned in 2020 you won a tournament. Talk us about that tournament and how you won and everything that went into that.
One thing before we get too far too, I do want to mention the TBF as well. Which is
Yes.
kind of a to me is sort of an in between on the from grassroots local stuff and the TBF. Fished that for 2 years, and wound up winning, or not winning. I went to the national championship one year, and then kind of progressed from there. But so as far as 2020. Man, that was an awesome year. And I started off, I had a 9th place finish on the St. John's, 12th on Okeechobee, and I had a 59th on Toho, and then that's when COVID hit. And it was like, it put a stop on everything, and they moved the 4th tournament from April to July on the Harris chain. And wound up winning that one. It was they made it a 3-fish tournament just because it was so hot. And wound up winning that with like 20 pounds, like 6 ounces, something like that. Man, that was awesome.
It was a lot like the 4Bs.
It was
the one we fished.
Yeah, and I think I went down the week before, and I found this long stretch of hydrilla, and I got a big bite in it, and I couldn't get the fish out. The grass was super thick, and you'll see why I tell you that in a minute. But I went to this area, had a little area where, it had some good fish in it. I figured I could catch 12 to 15 pounds, come out with a top 10, and, be in good shape. I had a good early boat number in the morning, got kind of in that area, settled down. I think I put my power poles down once we got in there, and I didn't even move them. I had a small, limit. I was catching them on a little top water prop bait, kind of like a devil's horse that my buddy Patrick Pierce paints up for me. Shout out to Patrick. He's a good dude. But kind of fished around in that area, and I noticed that the water had fallen a little bit. And I'm like, and the fish were, a lot smaller. I kind of had to switch. They quit biting the top water bait and went to a swim bait, like a little skinny dipper, like kind of shad colored. Caught a few on it. Come up to this hydrilla mat, and I flip in there, and my co-angler kind of throws catty cornered out in front of us, where I'd just been throwing, and catches a 6-pounder, and I'm like, really, man? Like this is how it's gonna go. It's gonna be one of those days. All right, cool. Well, long story short, we kind of got out of that area and started working the way out, and I noticed some current. And I'm like, all right, cool. So I'm kind of throwing in these current breaks and nothing. Well, my co-angler pitches back up in and starts catching some good fish. And I'm like, the light bulb kind of just went off. And that's one of the great things about the BFL. You got a co-angler in the back of the boat. A lot of times, I'm not too proud to say there's been several times where, my co-angler's been the one that's kind of bird dogged me and really kind of helped settle you down, knowing that there's fish there. And I come around the corner into that hydrilla stretch, and I'm punching the hydrilla like with an 1.5 ounce weight. Goes down, boom, I get bit. I mean, my rod bows up, makes that awesome braid, stretching sound that's like my favorite sound in the world, dude. I love the flip.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned from the week before, you try to horse them out of it, you're not going to get them, because it was, dude, the top of the mat had to be, I don't know, 1.5 feet, 2 foot deep, thick, super thick for a hydrilla mat. So I go over to it. I couldn't get it out. I tried to reach down there, and I'm not very tall, so my arms are not very long. So I tried to get. I couldn't get it. Well, I told my co-angler, his name was Reyes. I said, "Dude, hold my feet." I said, "I'm gonna, try to reach down there, at least get my weight back." So I reach down there into the mat, and I'm feeling around. And finally, I get, and dude, my face is literally touching the water. I've got my arms so far down up in it. And I finally get a hold of where the fish is at, and I made sure he didn't have any teeth. Pulled him out, dude. It's a 6-pounder. And I'm like, super excited, obviously, and like looking at the fish, dude. My bait's not even in his mouth, and I could see way back in his cheek where he had a hook mark. But I guess throughout the whole process there, I don't know if when I pulled him out, everything fell out, or maybe I don't know. But so I put him in the box. I keep going. I bet not even 20 minutes later, the hydrilla stretch ran out. I picked up a big black and blue medlock jig, man, and I went to work, and it didn't take but about 5 minutes. Pitched into some lily pads, set up on one. It was a giant. I pulled back, and of course, what do? They try to go right back to the lily pads, dude. And so I pulled harder, and my rod breaks. And it's like I've only got 3 foot of rod. I'm like, no, and I'm reeling up, and I realize I still got the fish. So we finally get it, put him, get him in the net. It's a 7-pounder. All right, so I sit down, retie. At this point, I've got a 6, a 7, and like maybe a 2, and my third one's not very big. I bet I don't even make 8 more pitches, and I get another bite. And I set the hook on him. This one decides to go out into deeper water, and then when my co-angler grabs the net, and he's got the net up in the air, which co-anglers, if you're listening, not a good idea, because whenever I went to go, the fish made a turn, and I came back over my shoulder with the net, with my rod, the rod gets caught up in the net, and I'm like,
oh no,
back here, dude, the fish is just going nuts, and I'm like, well, dude, like what the heck? And I was like, just grab him. Well, dude, Reyes, man, hats off to him, because he's a big old boy too, and he's Superman dove on the front of my boat, scraped his knee all up, and wound up lipping the fish and put him in the floor of the boat. It's another 7-pounder. And
wow,
it was just one of those days. Like you hear people talk about how when it's your time to win, like there's nothing you can do to stop it. That was one of those days, and I think he wound up coming in third. He had 15 pounds and lost a 4 or 5 pounder that would have won him. So we had a really, really awesome day, and all those fish came within 20 yards of 15, 20 yards of each other, something like that. So it was a really, really neat experience.
Really? Wow. Well, without giving away too much of the secret, were you making a long run, or were you staying in Little Harris? Like, kind of give us an idea where you were going.
I went to Griffin. I mean, I don't mind telling.
Yeah.
I went into Griffin. That's where I kind of had the most luck in practice, And I mean, I was super bummed. Like I get in this area, man, where I was catching a pile of fish on a prop bait, topwater prop bait, and it's like, where did they go? You know, and but it wound up working out, you know, and you just with Florida, man, you got to learn. I've had to learn the hard way that these fish, they don't just swim for miles and miles. They ain't going nowhere.
Or you
No.
hearing the typical brim popping in the
Mm-mm.
mats, and
No,
that's
no,
interesting. Because usually
no.
whenever you get on those good bites in Florida, man, you're hearing pop, 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 and then you pull out that big jig, and that's whenever the magic typically happens. So, what do you
Yeah,
think they were doing in there then? Just,
I
mean,
think the current had them positioned. They were
okay,
back in an area. I mean that because in practice, I mean I lost one 6 or 7 or so on a I think I might have been flipping. I can't remember, but I think when they started moving water and it just sucked those fish out of that area because like I said,
gotcha.
the water had dropped 6 or 8 inches, and I think when it did, they found the first little bit deeper water that they had, and there was current rolling through there. And it really congregated them. But it also made the hydrilla super thick because it was really funny. Like the top of, usually a hydrilla mat is only like 6 or 8 inches, maybe a little bit bigger, thick, but that current made it a lot worse. And I think that was kind of why they were kind of hanging out. But there was a lot of bait coming through. They didn't have to move. The bait was coming to them because the current was bringing it.
Awesome.
Right. Right. So, well, if you would walk us through, you talked about that medlock jig. It's a notorious bait in Florida, especially in the summertime. It's really interesting to hear how there was a lot of guys I remember in that tournament were offshore, and it's really interesting to talk to the winner of that event. And you were up shallow and pitching into or flipping into grass clumps, thick hydrilla. So that's something that I've kind of come to learn while living in Florida is during the hottest part of the year, those fish like to get up in that grass. So if you would, you're talking about a medlock jig. Will you walk us through your setup, your rod, reel, line, what color of jig, and then what do you like to tip? That's a very common question I hear is what do you tip the medlock jig with as far as a trailer?
So, typical 1 ounce black and blue medlock jig. I will alternate between I don't remember the bait, but it's a crawl that's kind of got some action to it, kind of like the Gambler, like it's Flappin' Daddy. It's either something like that or a D-bomb. That's usually my two go-tos. They like a speed crawl too sometimes for a little bit of a smaller profile, but 65-pound braid. And then I've kind of gotten into it there, and I know you've done some of this before too. I built some of my own rods. So I've got a 7'9" MHX. It's the FP 936, I think. It's the flip and pitch. It's a 7'9" extra heavy rod. And then to me, I like a high gear ratio reel, like at least a 7.3, 7.5 to 1. I've got to where I really like the 8s because it's, I like to pitch in there and then it's real, I pull my rod up to get the bait out, and then I like to crank my reel and kind of get that bait out of the water so I can get right back in there. But that's pretty much my setup as far as that's concerned. It's pretty standard. I guess the only other thing that I do maybe a little bit different than some other folks is I like to keep a bobber stopper on there. And obviously, I'm not using a weight, but Kyle and I used to. That's another thing we used to do together. We used to play tennis, and that one thing we always had is that deadener that you would put on your tennis racket. And I feel like that little piece of rubber that's on your line a lot of times will help you from breaking off. Because even with 65-pound braid, when I put the wood to them. I ain't playing around with them, and I think that little bit kind of helps deaden some of that shock. Same thing for an Alabama rig. We talked about that a little bit earlier on that braid. I mean, I'm sure you guys have lost a handful of Alabama rig just because you go to make that long cast and your braid gets caught up in the reel and then it stops all of a sudden but your Alabama rig does not stop. It keeps going.
There she goes.
Yeah, and there's you got all these expensive baits and. Anyways, but that ever since I started doing that, I'm not lying to you, I have not lost an Alabama rig on the cast like that. I guess that's probably the only thing I maybe do a little bit different. But I love that medlock jig. You can't come to Florida in the summertime without it. 100%.
No, not at all. Not at all. So, well, we're coming up on the new season, 2022. The BFL. Obviously, you're going to fish all of them again this year. The first tournament's coming up in, I think, 2 weeks. It's going to be on the Harris chain. Yeah,
Yep.
on the Harris chain where you've won before.
Mm-hmm.
What are you thinking about for that tournament? How are you getting ready? Have you been thinking about it? Like, what do you hope that the fish are doing? Like,
yeah, I'm a big prepper and planner, and so when it gets into December, I work for UPS, so super busy at work, and I don't get to fish as much, but I can hang out at the house and organize. And so I've done a lot of that, a lot of tackle prep, and just for the whole season, kind of getting an idea and inventory of what I got, what I don't have, what I need to order, blah blah blah. And then kind of we got to January, and last weekend I went and stayed down there. I fished Friday and Saturday. Stayed with our good buddy Shelby Concon.
That was my college fishing partner at University of Florida.
Yep.
Okay.
And so he always hooks me up with a place to crash there anytime I come into town. So that's super nice, and he's an awesome guy. But it was okay. We spent one day on Griffin, one day on Harris, and they've definitely done a lot of spraying. And you can definitely tell there's areas in Griffin that have grass. There's areas in Griffin that typically have grass that do not. And some of the key, and you asked kind of what I was looking for there, is the quality of the grass. I'm constantly pulling some up, checking it out, checking out what it looks like. Because that a lot of times has a big, to do with how whether or not the fish are going to hold in
the whole ecosystem, how much oxygen it's putting into the water, bringing in bait fish and everything else.
Yeah, and Harris, they sprayed Harris a month ago, something like that, and they nuked it. It's gone. And there's a couple of areas that have got some grass in Harris. You can kind of go around and find it. And I found one little area that's got some grass, actually two little areas, but those fish don't go anywhere. They don't just all of a sudden up and just vanish. It's a good lake, and it's when that grass is going, you really realize how much shell is in that lake, and how much the little hard spots and stuff. And so I spent a lot of time graphing around. Again, prepping, like waypoint management. I've got old waypoints where there was grass. So I'm going through, idling a lot of it, deleting waypoints. But the fishing was overall was pretty good.
So that means all my waypoints that haven't been any good for the last few years, they might be good again.
Yeah, well, maybe
because I mean, dude, for the last few years, like there was a ton of grass in that lake, man, and that's where it was won, and it seems like it kind of diluted the fish out. And I mean, now it seems like, I don't know, you think they're going to go stack back up on those shell bars again now that there's a lot of lack of grass now?
They got to go somewhere, Kyle. And there's that lake sets up a lot like Lake Santa Fe, which is close to the house, and Kyle and I have spent a lot of time on it. In that it's got the little shell spots, it's got the little subtle drops, it's got the maiden cane or Kissimmee grass, whatever you want to call it, and it's got the brush too. So they got to go somewhere. And the one good thing about Harris and all those lakes is there's a ton of canals, like a million of them, and they're gonna really, I feel like, migrate just to some of those. But the other thing that I noticed too, is that the water's higher than what I've ever seen there. And so we know what fish like to do when the water gets high, and if the kind of things keep going like they are now, they'll have a pretty good spawn, I would imagine, which is going to be really good for them.
Do you feel like they're getting close to pulling up? I mean,
yeah. I went and I checked a couple of canals, and like that's the whole reason for this trip is just kind of getting a lay of the land, seeing really where grass is growing, where it's not, just kind of give me an idea what to focus on. But I stuck my head in a couple of canals, and it was kind of a little bit harder to see because the water was higher, but I did see some beds.
Yeah.
I did wind up seeing a buck on a bed, and I didn't, pester him or nothing.
I feel like that's a pretty common misconception for folks that weren't born and raised here in Florida. Is they think, oh, it's January, it's going to be a 100% exclusive offshore deal, and you're just missing the boat, man, because you're always there's always an early wave, and typically those giant fish, they're in that first wave, man.
Yeah.
And if you're not, and if you're ruling that pattern out, then
yeah, unless we have this crazy warming trend, I think the tournament is going to be around a new moon, so that's not my favorite. Obviously, you'd like a full, but I think it's supposed to be full this week or so, but it's super cold. So hopefully that'll kind of help hold them off a little bit. And then, we'll kind of go from there. But yeah, you definitely always got to keep your eye on making sure that the spawn is not totally going down. But the beauty of Florida, it's a lot different than, up north, where you maybe get this couple of week window where they all head to the hill. Like, Florida's not like that. They trickle in a little bit, and they'll stop, and they'll trickle in some more, and then you'll have a really good wave in like February or March, and then it'll kind of teeter back off throughout the rest of the spring. But if I was a betting man, I think it's still probably going to be one offshore if I was a betting man.
Yeah.
Okay. So are you thinking action baits or Carolina rigs, or just dragging a worm, or swim bait, or maybe you're offshore but you're targeting submerged grass? Like, what's your thoughts there?
And the beauty of that lake, man, is that it's wide open. You can go and catch them punching mats. That's something those big fish really like to do too. Like right before they go to head, to go spawn, they're going to find them something thick to go sit in, especially when you get a cold front too. Or you get some messed up weather, they'll just ease on over and hang out up underneath the mat. So don't rule out punching. Yeah. Sometimes they'll kind of hang out in some of the maiden cane and whatnot, the little holes there in that. But for the most part on the offshore grass, I like to really throw moving baits. I like a chatterbait a lot. I like a lipless crankbait. And sometimes you got to slow down with a soft plastic presentation like a Texas rig or Carolina rig, and really worm them, and because let's face it, they're going to see a lot of chatterbaits and rattle traps and crankbaits and this, that, and the other between now and then. So yeah. I kind of know it's kind of a roundabout, not a very direct answer, but Florida's not a very direct place. You kind of really have to keep your eyes open and your mind open on what's going on.
Right. As they say, bring the kitchen sink, because you never know.
Oh, dude, you should see my boat. It's organized, but it's loaded to the brim, because you never know. Now I'll cull some of that stuff out when we get, hopefully by the night before the tournament. I'll take at least half of that crap out. But I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. That's my motto on that. So,
I will say John's boat is the most organized part about John's whole life.
I will agree with that. Yes, I'm pretty organized at work too.
Okay.
I'm pretty organized at work too. But Kyle, you'll be proud of me. I told you I was messing around the shop. I think I showed you the other night when you were at the house for New Year's. I finally got me some shelves in my shop, dude. and I had crap everywhere. All right, it was bad, just like what Kyle said. It was. But I'm finally where I need to be in that. But I like to stay pretty organized with my. You
should have also seen how this guy was setting off fireworks, man. He had holes all in his shirt by the time we were done.
Good Lord!
Jesus Christ, dude!
I was wearing like an athletic, like it was a Columbia.
Was it AFCO or Columbia? Okay,
one of those. Yeah. It was a Z-Man shirt. Brand new. I bet I ain't wore it 3 times, and it's got holes, like little black marks all over like the shoulder and stuff. I looked at it when I came inside. I was like, "Well, I ruined that. ruined that shirt." But,
it was a good time though.
Yeah, we had a bunch of. A bunch. We had a handful of friends and family and stuff over at the house, and we always do some fireworks for the kids because we're all getting old now and we have children. So, and that's kind of what it turns into being about. They liked it. So
yep.
And I didn't lose a finger. So, or anything else.
Or an eye.
Yeah, or not.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
I didn't even
That's a
burn
good thing.
myself either, which is usually I wound up burning myself, but I didn't. So
Right,
it was
right.
awesome.
So, well, let's kind of shift gears a little bit and talk just generically about like the Harris chain. For somebody that's never been there before, what would be the tips that you would give them on how to approach the Harris chain, the bait selection to bring with them? Like if you were just starting out, brand new angler, or you had to take someone, what would be your advice for breaking down the Harris chain? What to fish with?
So on the Harris chain, you can really get, it's such a huge body of water. The lakes themselves individually are not that big, but they're so far spread out. I mean, and what you can really do if you're not careful is you can spread yourself way too thin, because you can wind up with some grass fishing griffin, and then you got some brush piles and
Eustace or
Harris,
something, or
and
Harris.
then you've got stuff down in a Popka. So what I would suggest to somebody is to find you a home base. Maybe take a day, a half a day, or whatever. Go ride around, go look at all the lakes or whatnot, and pick you one and learn and stick with it, because each one of them, the tournament can be won out of any one of those lakes.
Right.
And then from there, you're kind of going to have to figure out that's going to determine what kind of tackle you're rolling with. So if you're in one of the lakes, it's got a lot of shallow water, vegetation, you want to make sure you got your flipping stick and, that ounce and a half, ounce, 3/4, weight to do some dobbing there. And then, if you want to fish offshore grass, I would have definitely, I mean, that jackhammer is, I think anybody can agree with that. It's the real deal Holyfield. But it's you can get really strung out on colors and whatnot. But I would have me a shad one, and then I would have like a like a bluegill kind of colored, because those things are expensive, right? So I would keep it fairly basic as far as colors are concerned. Same thing like with your lipless crankbaits. I'd have me a shad kind of colored, maybe like a gold, and maybe one that's a little more of a solid color if it gets cloudy or whatnot. Square bill, I definitely have me a square bill tied on. That's just a good bait any of where you're at in there to kind of cover some water. And then as far as a Texas rig or a Carolina rig, I'm going to throw, I think most people like it too, is I like a speed worm. I'm sticking to kind of darker colors, June bug. They do like green pumpkin a lot in those lakes too, more so than they do anywhere else in Florida. With depending on the wind, I mean, this time of year I like to go as light as I can go. Start off with like an 1/8, and I wouldn't go much past 1/4. Just because it's I think it gets it a little far down in that grass. And probably the last, I'd always have a top water tied on. There's always columns. I've always got one laying. I love that devil's horse style of prop bait, and that's another thing. Like we talked about the medlock earlier, I would not come here without one of those jokers tied on, especially as they move in to start spawning and stuff. And then I'd have something weightless Senko, a weightless fluke. There's often times where that's the ticket as well. Is that really that finesse?
That goes for anywhere in Florida, man. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's the cool thing about the Harris chain is there's so many different ways to fish it, like Florida, Okeechobee, in general, like Toho or the whole Kissimmee chain. The Harris chain just sets up a little bit different. It almost it's probably like sets up as the most offshore fishery in Florida potentially, man. Like there's just so much room. Like you see guys that come down from the Tennessee River and stuff and just dominate on that lake because it does fish like a big deep water offshore lake a lot. And then you can get up there and flip those fish shallow like the traditional Florida lakes that we're all used to. So it's just a really cool fishery, man. The diversity there is it's awesome.
And docks too, man. There's
docks. Yeah, wood, man. You can go flip wood. I remember whenever we were fishing our college event there was a large laydown in it's eluding me. What's the big canal that goes from Eustis to up to Griffin?
Haynes Creek.
Haynes Creek. There's a large laydown in Haynes Creek, dude, and we were cranking that thing with a square bill, and I caught an 8 and a 5, and I mean, big fish just hang around wood there. So,
yeah, a lot of current rolling through there too.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, it is, as far as it's one of the better offshore grass fisheries in Florida. A lot of it has to do with it's one of the only fisheries that actually has offshore grass. You know, even though they try to spray it and keep it suppressed, that and Toho, and there's a handful more, but the place is loaded especially when they let it grow. There's nothing it's nothing to be out there in the middle of one of those lakes that be topped out hydrilling 10 foot of water.
Mm-hmm.
But even whenever it doesn't have the grass, like you're saying, they're relating to those hard spots, man. Those shell bars and stuff like that, and go cranking them, and it's just, it's awesome.
Yeah, I really like the Harris chain, and I didn't start fishing it until I think 2018 was the first time I fished it. Like, I never really had a reason to go. The club I fished back in the day, they didn't go. It's like 2 hours and some change from the house, so it's not like I really want to go take a day trip and come back and be exhausted on the way home. But I like it. I like how it sets up. I like that you can make a long run and get away. I'll do it, but I don't really care to fish in a crowd. I kind of like to get away and kind of do my own little thing and try to get away, from most of the folks. And that lake, you can really do that.
Chris Lane, whenever he won, I think it was an Open, he went all the way through Eustis, up through Haynes Creek, up through Griffin, and started going up the Ocklawaha like if you were going up toward Rodman.
Yeah.
And he won his event way up there, dude. Yep. I remember going and finding that spot, and we caught some fish off that spot too. But you can stretch it out.
Yeah, for sure. That
Ocklawaha
starts really pretty.
That was in 2012. That was the same year that was the Open that he won right before he won the Classic on the Red River. And I do remember reading the article at the end that he was making a tremendously long run. I didn't know it was that long, but that's a hike to get all the way up there from where they launched in Harris.
You gotta walk through. He remembers the dates on everything.
Dude,
it's crazy.
I know. I was listening to the podcast. I've listened to all of them. And I think it was the one with Brian New, and you're like, yeah, that was, blah, 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 whatever. I'm like, dude, I can't do that. I can't even tell you what I ate for breakfast this morning. But that's impressive. But yeah, he did. He made a long run. And the only bad part about some of that, when these big tournaments get won, it's hard to repeat that. Everything is cyclic. I think eventually that spot or area or kind of pattern will come back around. But will it be one this time, this go around between the first couple of tournaments here on the Harris? Maybe, but definitely gonna get a lot of people checking it, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you want to go further, his co-angler day one was Kyle Monte that lives in Okeechobee.
Yeah.
I remember watching the weigh-in. So
that's crazy, dude. I don't have that kind of memory. That's impressive, Aaron.
I mean, well, I think what really kind of started that is when I started fishing bigger tournaments, we came to Florida. And, I mean, I just did all the research I could, finding the podcast, finding the old magazine articles that was with Bassmaster. I mean, I've got every Bassmaster and FLW magazine from 2009 to present. And just kind of, what did they write about? It's amazing when you think about 2009 through 2012, how much information was actually published in those magazines. It was almost like they were publishing it knowing that no one's really going to read it except for the hardcore angler, because it broke it down to all the extreme basics. And the articles are still good today, but some of those old classics. I remember reading the article in Bass Times right after it came out after he'd won, and it talked about him making that long run. He was actually throwing a spinnerbait in the morning, and then he went to flipping a gambler BB cricket after that. So, but yeah, that was a heck of a run. So we talked about breaking down Harris, the baits to throw and everything. But I do have to ask, if you had someone that was coming to Florida, specifically Harris Channel Lakes, for the first time, and they could only bring one rod, one bait, what would it be, in your opinion?
Oh man, probably a lipless crankbait, man. This time of year, it would be a lipless crankbait, and I like to throw mine on fluorocarbon. A lot of people like braid, and the Harris chain has got a significantly different color of water than the other lakes. It's not tannic like a lot of your other Florida lakes. It's more of a green and going more of a green hue. But I would say lipless crankbait, and that would be just because you can cover so much water. You can do a lot of the different things with it. You don't just have to throw a lipless crankbait out there and reel it in. Like that's all you're doing, you're missing a lot. And if you're just throwing it in open water, you're missing it. If you're just, if you're only fishing it in grass, if you're, you can fish that joker on the bottom. You'd be surprised what that lipless crankbait will go through. That would be what I would go with.
Right. I will back you up. The lipless crankbait is phenomenal here in Florida. Now, there is one thing I do a little bit different that I picked up from, being a co-angler, and you learn all those different kind of techniques as a co-angler.
Yep.
Is everyone picks up that half, 3/4 ounce lipless crankbait when they come to Florida, and those are good. But I have found, this is just me, that the 1/4 ounce, it has a big name to play in Florida as well, even though it's a smaller profile bait.
Especially if you're fishing behind somebody.
Yeah.
If that's gold for all you co-anglers out there.
Yeah. So
I've got a handful of them of the 1/4 ounce, and I'll, you're gonna make me go out there and go rig up another rod. Thanks, Darren. With a 1/4 ounce, I think I've already got 2 traps tied on. But with that lipless, I really like to have 2 different sound signatures to it. So maybe I'll have one that's super high frequency, a lot of little BBs, and then maybe I'll have one that's a one knocker. And generally, one of the 2 is going to outperform the other.
So the light bulbs going off in my head are one thing you said earlier. Obviously, you were there last weekend, and you said the water level's a little high. I mean, that tends to migrate fish just a smidge shallower, dude, and that's where that 1/4 ounce really shines, man.
They're going to follow that water line.
Yeah.
So, well, same question to you, Kyle. If you had one bait or you knew someone was coming to Florida, you've got a significant history fishing in Florida, fishing tournaments. What would be your one bait? Obviously, you can't say a lipless. So what would, in your mind?
Well, it would be a lipless, but if you're ruling that out for me, probably maybe just a punch-in setup, dude. Yeah.
Right.
So
you can't get wrong with that. If you in Florida, there's always a flipping bite going on somewhere.
Yep.
You just have to.
Whether that's a jig or whether that's just a half out, like something light for the maiden cane or whatever, whether you're fishing pads or even wood, dude. Honestly, it's just a flipping setup, man. Wood, docks, mats, maiden cane grass, whatever it may be. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I remember, I've fished as a co-angler for many, many years. And when I moved to Florida, so when I was living in Oklahoma, fishing in Arkansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, all the co-anglers and even the boaters, they always had a shaky head tied on because in a crunch, you need a bite. Shaky head's not a bad way to go. And they even work, especially on the St. Johns River, some of the offshore shell bars, ledges and all that. I mean, a shaky head is gold on the St. Johns River. But now I've kind of migrated to Florida, and all the co-anglers and all the boaters, you always see that one flipping setup. Like when I go out fishing, I always have a 8-foot flipping rod, 65-pound braid, ounce weight. I'll take a 3/4 ounce too because I want to try to get away. Being fishing behind somebody, I always want to try to go lighter and get away with the lightest weight I can possible. It's just a confidence thing. But I'll leave it in the rod glove. I'll leave the reel cover on the reel. I won't necessarily – I think we just lost John. But as I was just saying, there he is back. I won't necessarily unwrap that rod. I'm just going to have it there because in a crunch, it's a numbers game. And a lot of anglers have commented on blogs and groups that I've been a part of have always said, flipping bite, I don't really get a whole lot of bites where I live. Well, in Florida, it's a numbers game. And then the cool thing about it is you're going to catch a lot of keepers. So that's the 12 to 14-inch fish, but then you're going to run into that 8-pounder.
Yep.
I mean,
dude, flipping and punching, and we kind of use those terms in Florida synonymous with each other. But to me, I kind of take an analytical approach to it in that, just like you said, it's a numbers game. And if you couple the right area and you make more presentations, statistically, you're eventually going to get that bite. And I've caught a lot of really big fish from flipping, and dude, I love it, man. And the thing is too, man, when you get that big bite in Florida, and it don't matter what you're doing, right? Be it punching, flipping small grass, catching them on a worm, whatever. Put the poles down, put it on spot lock, whatever, and stop. Because those big fish, they're not long rangers. They don't hang out by themselves. He's got a brother or sister, or maybe even a grandma somewhere, around in that area. And if you sneak around, you're liable to hit her in the head and really turn your day around and possibly catch your personal best.
Right. So that's really interesting. So, well, we've had an exciting podcast with you, John. It's been great to have you on board. Just one last question for you and Kyle both. I mean, I know you guys have a strong history fishing together, but any final thoughts for the BFL Gator Division tournaments this year? I know we're getting started pretty quick here in the next couple of weeks on the Harris Chain. I'm excited. I know you're excited as well. Just any final thoughts for that tournament or just fishing knowledge in general?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm super glad that Revital Outdoors, you guys have partnered up with the sponsoring the BFLs, and because it's really going to put the product in front of a lot of people that are going to benefit from it. So I commend you guys for stepping out on that that limb and really helping you're going to help a ton of anglers, dude, because there's nothing worse than being out there and not feeling well, or hurting in the water, or not getting enough sleep or whatever. But overall, I would say for the BFLs, man, just go with an open mind, and don't put yourself in a box and say, I'm going to go do this. This is what I'm going to do. That's a good way to get smoked. Keep an open mind, and when you just kind of put the pieces together, and if you get a couple bites, man, slow down, just stop, and really, really pick apart an area. And I think a lot of times you'll be surprised with what you come across.
Yeah, that's great advice. I really like that, because you are right. That's one thing I've learned, and it's notorious for guys that do well in tournaments. I know Trevor Fitzgerald talks a lot about it. Another Florida hammer is once you're getting bit, don't go anywhere. Like, it's not, you don't put the fish in the box and keep burning. Like, slow down a little bit. You found where they're located, and big fish to small fish, they're never alone. Never alone.
No, and even because the bite will die down. Go do something else for 45 minutes to an hour, whatever, and come back. And be stealthy too. That's another thing that Florida gets so much pressure, and let's face it, generally you're fishing very shallow water. Like, dude, I turn my sonar is not pinging. If I'm up in shallow water, I can see the bottom. I can pretty much got a good idea how deep it is, and my trolling motor is not on 100. I'm creeping around at 20 or 30%, and I'm touching that trolling motor just as little as possible, and sneak up on them, because those big fish, they don't get big for no reason. They're smart, and you got to try to do everything you can to kind of help smart.
Absolutely. Kyle, you have any final thoughts? Anything you want to add?
Just be safe and have fun, man. Don't let it spin you out. You're there to enjoy the great outdoors, so go there and do that, and wear your life jackets, man. Just have a safe season. No casualties this season. Just everybody be safe, and God bless, and let's just enjoy the outdoors together.
Absolutely. So, well, gentlemen, it's been an honor having you both on. John, I know we want to get you back on the podcast in the season. I hope it's to recap one of your wins. Feel strongly like you're going to do well this year and hopefully make that regional in South Carolina. And we'll talk about that at another date because that's a whole different breed of fishing when we're going up there after the big spotted bass in clear water. A lot of docks to flip up there too. So, but I know we'll be seeing you at the tournaments. But John, for all the listeners out there, you are on Facebook, I believe, and
absolutely,
so check him out on our social media. He's a great representative of Vital Outdoors, more than just a friend to Kyle and I. So, great angler, and we know you're gonna have a good season. So, good luck out there, bud.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you guys for having me on. And like I said, I look forward to it. And I've got plenty of more stories about Kyle and I going fishing.
Yeah, I need to. In fact, John, you and I probably need to go practice together one day.
Oh, dude, I'll have you rolling, man. There's a really funny story about us trying to pull a John boat into this pond that was like a mile away. And I'll leave that for another time. It didn't go.
Yeah,
so well.
The fishing went excellent. What are you talking about?
Awesome. Well, the travel part did not go so well. We'll save that one for another day.
Yeah, that'll be another day.
Funny story. Really funny story.
Yeah, I got one of those too with my dad. It was a scamp, which is kind of like a John boat, but ended up breaking into a research pond, and by the end of the day, one of us was in the hospital with a spinnerbait in the back of the head. So, yeah, it was always got those stories, but not fun. So, well, gentlemen, have a great day. Again, thank you so much for being on here, and we look forward to talking to you again very soon.
All righty, man. Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Later.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap up this podcast with John Mobley, the Florida Hammer, a member of the Vital Outdoors family. He fishes the BFL Gator Division. We're very, very excited to have him on board. It's going to be a great season for everybody. So thank you for tuning into this podcast. Make sure, again, check out our website. If you're interested in learning more about Vital Outdoors and the CBD products that we have specifically for outdoor enthusiasts, like hunting and fishing enthusiasts like ourselves, we have a great full line of products that you can get on there. Whether it's inflammation relief that you're seeking or you have joint and back issues, trouble sleeping at night, or anxiety, all of our premium CBD products are put together just for those needs and to help outdoor enthusiasts stay out in the field doing what they love. So from all of us at Vital Outdoors, thank you for tuning into this podcast. Check us out on social media as well. Thank you. God bless. Be safe out there in the field. We'll talk to you soon.